Welcome back. Today on the Byte-Size Brief, we're going deep on SanDisk, ticker SNDK. Now, if you're like me, when you hear SanDisk, you probably picture those little USB thumb drives from back in the day. But believe it or not, this company has completely reinvented itself into a critical AI player. And its stock, it has just gone on an absolutely insane run, creating this huge battle on Wall Street between the bulls and the bears. We're going to get into all of it.
All right, let's just cut right to the chase. Over 1,000% since last August. And no, that is not a typo. 1,000%. So, the big question, the only question really, is what in the world is going on here? Is this for real? I mean, is this the start of something huge for SanDisk? Or is this just one massive hype-driven bubble that's about to pop? That's exactly what we're here to unpack.
So, to make sense of this, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at SanDisk's wild pivot into AI. Then, we'll get into the business of memory, how they actually make their money. After that, we'll dissect their just insane breakout quarter. Then comes the main event, the bull versus bear debate. And finally, we'll wrap up with what you need to watch next.
All right, first up, SanDisk's explosive AI pivot. It's funny, for so many of us, the name SanDisk is just synonymous with those little USB drives, right? But the company today, it is a totally different beast. And this change, it happened practically overnight.
So the big moment was back in February of 2025. SanDisk got spun off from its parent company, Western Digital. And this was the game changer. It let them ditch that old consumer brand image and go all in, becoming this pure play, hyper-focused company, making memory specifically for the AI boom. We're not talking about storing your photos anymore. We're talking about powering the massive brains inside the world's most powerful data centers.
Okay, so that leads to the next question. How does this new version of SanDisk actually make its money? Well, their whole business, and I mean all of it, is built on one single critical technology, and that tech has become the absolute foundation of this whole AI build-out we're seeing. Let's dig in.
The heart of their business is something called NAND flash memory. All that really means is it's a type of storage that's super fast, and, critically, it doesn't forget the data when you turn the power off. And in the world of AI, where these huge models need to grab and crunch enormous amounts of data, like instantly, well, you can see why this stuff is non-negotiable.
Here's maybe the easiest way to picture it. Think of a big AI model as the brain. The GPUs, like from NVIDIA, they're the processing power, doing all the heavy lifting, all the math. So where does NAND flash fit in? It's the AI short-term memory. It's the ultra-fast recall it needs to actually think. And SanDisk? They're the ones building that memory. But here's something you really have to get about this whole story. To understand SanDisk, you have to understand the memory market. And historically, it's been just brutal. I mean, insane booms followed by these gut-wrenching busts. But something's different this time. The big players, they learned a hard lesson back in the 2023 downturn. So now, companies like SanDisk, Samsung, Micron, they're being way more careful about managing supply. They're not just flooding the market anymore. And that new discipline, that's a huge reason why things are so strong right now. It's a really key piece of this puzzle.
So let's talk about what happened recently. What happens when you take that new disciplined supply and you smash it together with this absolute tidal wave of demand from AI? Well, you get a perfect storm. And that brings us to SanDisk's last quarter. And folks, the numbers are just staggering.
Okay, just look at this. In Q1, they did $2.3 billion in revenue. EPS was $1.22. Pretty good, right? Solid quarter. But then, Q2 happened. Revenue jumped to over $3 billion. That's a 31% jump in 3 months. And the earnings per share? It didn't just double or triple. It went up more than 5x to $6.20. It just completely blew away all expectations. This is what hypergrowth looks like right here.
And seeing it on a chart like this really drives it home. This isn't just a little bit of growth. This is a fundamental step change for the company. The whole trajectory just shifted upwards almost overnight. And the reason is simple. The big cloud companies, the hyperscalers, they are buying up every bit of NAND memory they can get their hands on for these massive AI projects. And listen, you don't have to take my word for it. The CEO, David Guckler, said it himself. He said customers are flocking to SanDisk because their tech is top-notch, and it's happening right at the exact moment this massive wave of demand is hitting. It's the classic story, right product, right place, right time.
All right, now for the main event, the bull versus bear debate. Because you'd think with a stock up 1,000% and earnings going vertical, everyone would be singing the same tune, right? Well,
Not exactly. This is where things get really interesting, because that insane rise has created a huge divide on Wall Street.
So here's the fundamental disagreement. The bulls, they're saying, hey, this isn't just a blip. This is the very beginning of a multi-year AI supercycle, and SanDisk is in the perfect spot. But the bears are looking at the same chart and saying, whoa, slow down. This looks like a classic, hype-driven peak, and we all know what happens at the peak. Let's get into the details of each side.
So the argument for the bulls is all about that insane demand. They're seeing demand from AI data centers growing over 40% a year. The gap between supply and demand is huge, and SanDisk thinks it's going to last all the way through 2026. And what does that mean? It means they can charge more. They've already hiked prices by 10%. Plus, the bulls will tell you SanDisk has a tech edge with their next-gen BiCS8 memory.
And here's the kicker for the bull case. The stock is trading at just 16.3 times what they're expected to earn next year. Now think about that. For a company that's projected to grow its earnings by 300%, bulls would argue that 16 times earnings isn't just fair, it might actually be cheap.
Okay, but what about the bears? What are they worried about? Well, their number one concern is that the stock price right now assumes everything goes perfectly. They'll remind you that this industry is famous for its wild swings and that SanDisk's incredible profits depend entirely on memory prices staying this high. They've got huge competitors like Samsung breathing down their necks. And then you have some other potential warning signs, like insiders selling shares and the lingering risk that Western Digital might decide to sell its huge chunk of the company.
So the big question from the bear camp is this. What happens if things aren't perfect? The whole bull story relies on two things: demand staying through the roof and supply staying limited. But what if the big tech companies decide to slow down their spending just a little? Or what if a competitor brings a new factory online faster than expected? Even a small shift in that delicate balance could send memory prices and SanDisk stock tumbling.
Okay, so with this huge debate raging, what comes next? What are the actual things we should be watching for? Well, there are two really big milestones coming up on their roadmap, and frankly, they could decide who wins this argument.
First, you gotta watch the ramp-up of their new Byte-Size technology. This is their next-gen stuff, and getting it scaled up is absolutely crucial for their profits. And second, and this one could be a huge deal, is something called High Bandwidth Flash, or HBF. They're working on it with SK Hynix, and it's designed to be a direct competitor to the super expensive HBM memory you find in today's top-of-the-line AI chips.
And we actually have a pretty clear timeline here. They expect Byte-Size 8 to be the majority of what they make by the end of this fiscal year. Then, the first taste of that new high-bandwidth flash is set to launch late in 2026. The full systems with all the controllers and everything, that's looking like early 2027. So mark your calendars. These are the dates that matter.
So, it all comes back to this one question. Is this an AI memory boom, or is it a bull trap? After a run like this, you have to ask, is SanDisk on the ground floor of a whole new era, or is this a classic trap set to catch investors right at the top? Honestly, the evidence for both sides was pretty compelling, and the next year or so is going to be absolutely decisive. That wraps up today's deep dive on SanDisk, SNDK. For a sharper, more candid discussion, join us on the full audio podcast. Drop your questions and takes in the comments. We read every one.